This video is made possible by the Eliason Group, an Agile consulting service. You can locate the video under Follow Us, then select Recent Videos on YouTube on the agilenewengland.org website.
I was invited by Richard, and thank him very much for inviting me. I run the Agile RTP user group, and we are always looking for speakers. So I have some shameless promotion I'll be passing around later. With my contact information on there, my Twitter ID, I'm just going to put up right here so you can find me. At Catherine Lewis. And I'm always looking for speakers, so if anybody has a topic that they want to share at Agile RTP, please reach out. I'm going to start with the schedule. I'd like to share a story which got me interested in this topic, and then talk about what is unconscious bias for about 15 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 unconscious biases that I've seen in product development and some stories surrounding that. And a long time ago at a party, I did a trust exercise, which ended up being an affinity bias exercise. And I learned all kinds of things like I like people who work outside rather than in cities, and who like rock and roll music versus country music. And I altered this exercise to have dimensions that you see in the workplace. So we're going to practice with that exercise, and then there's going to be some Q&A. Okay? So my story is, my daughter lives in Berlin. I was sitting at her bar. She's an excellent cook, and there's this big kind of kitchen bar. And she just poured me a glass of Chardonnay. And she's a gigster, so she does coding gigs. We used to call them consultants or contractors way back when, but gigsters is the term now. And she said, she got a phone call, and she said, I have to take this, it could be a gig. So the phone rings, and she picks it up, and she's like, hi, how you doing? So tell me in your own words, if your product is going to be successful, how is the world going to be a better place? So she's really on the offensive right away. And then she asked further questions. She asked, so tell me about the team. And she looks at me and she says, 37 engineers and they're all men. And then she asked about the perks. So what are the perks? Unlimited craft beer, all you can drink. And there's also somebody that cleans up after us. Her name is Agnes. So she says, why would I want to be the second woman on the team? It's just, what would make this attractive to me? And the guy was stumped. He's like, yeah, it's attractive to all the other guys. So she's, sorry, not interested in this. Oh, the other thing, the deploys are Friday nights. So just like never, not interested in a job where the deploys are Friday nights. So she hung the phone up, and we started talking about, why does this happen, where you have a team and it's all men engineers, and women are dropping out of tech like flies. Why is this happening? And then we got onto the subject of unconscious bias, and then I started looking into it a little bit further. How many people here work on a team with like very few women on the team? Yeah. Yeah, it's a kind of a systemic thing. So if you were in HR and you wanted to attract them, the unlimited beer and it was also tennis shoes, your running shoes, every 3 months you get new running shoes. So these things were not perks. And she asked, like, how much beer would one person drink a night? And the guy said, at least $60 worth a night. And she's like, well, can you just give me that cash? And of course they said no, but that might have been an attractive thing for her. So unconscious biases are little mental shortcuts we make, and it's prejudices that we have from how we grew up and what our value sets are. And we're not aware of them. And these biases can be based on whether you're introverted or extroverted, or if you like country, western, or rock and roll. If there's college, city, or country, if there's a name for it, there's probably a bias written for it. The positive side of unconscious bias is that it allows us to process decisions really quickly. So this is how we are hardwired to be able to recognize threat or non-threat. And there's a book here, Strangers to Ourselves. He quotes, Tim Wilson quotes, we're faced with around 11 million bits of information at any given moment. So we have to be able to clump these bits of information to be able to make any kind of sense of them. And that's the plus side of unconscious bias. So which one of these is a snake, and would you jump over both of them? The one on the right's a snake, but I probably would jump over both of them. Yeah. So that's the reason our brains are hardwired this way. Is it was a survival thing, and it helped us make decisions. So talk amongst yourselves for 30 seconds. Which one of these business women would have a salary advantage? And then shout out the one on the right or the one on the left. And this lady here. More hands up here. How about which one of these businessmen might have a career advantage? How many of you say this guy? Guy on the right? Okay, how many of you say the guy on the left? Okay, the guy on the right had more hands. Okay, which one of these might be a CEO? John? Only, so, John? Okay, or this lady? Okay, it's quite interesting. So there's blonde women see 7% increase in salary over brunettes. Mature-faced people have a career advantage over baby-faced people. Inclusive of software. More CEOs named John than women CEOs in total. So did you notice that your hands mimic this? The cumulative room. Yeah. So the studies for reference are included in the slides, and there are scores of studies like this. There's no shortage. It took me 10 minutes to find that. So I'm going to talk about 5 biases that I see in product development. And if I could have help handing these out, I have some cheat sheets just for reference. In here I have 20 biases and some examples. The first one is affinity bias, and this is the tendency to be attracted to people who are like ourselves. And this is something that's very heavily affecting the workplace. So we're going to have an exercise on this one shortly. The bandwagon effect. So the bandwagon is you believe the latest thing and everybody jumps on the bandwagon. What's the name of that game that everybody was playing and they were walking around playing that game? Pokemon bandwagon. Or in the workplace, has anybody had some kind of, like, let's do a big SAP ERP implementation bandwagon thing, and all of a sudden we have, until the expenses start coming in. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias affects us because instead of trying to falsify our hypotheses in lean startup, we tend to just prove the hypothesis that we think is, we confirm it rather than trying to falsify it. We see this all the time in product development as well. IKEA effect. So the IKEA, you know, IKEA furniture that you sweat to put together? So there's proven studies that say that if you have had any sort of labor involved in putting together the consumer product, that you like it more. And IKEA makes their money off of this idea. And I was working on, I come from telecommunications. I was working at Bell Northern Research, then Nortel, and ALU. How many people here know Bay Networks or Nortel? Yes. I was working on a base transceiver station, a BTS. It was an outdoor BTS, and it was a 2-year project. Beautiful piece of machinery. It could withstand all kinds of temperature, and we loved building this product. Demo day for the customer. The customer even loved it. Turns out they wanted an indoor BTS. So 2 years of just like loving building a product. And the IKEA effect is very closely related to the sunk cost fallacy. So you're sinking more cost into it because you're loving building it. And this BTS that we were involved in, the customer very clearly said they wanted an indoor, but it was sort of ignored because we were so busy doing a better product. So I have some, before we get to this next slide, I would like you guys, let me back up here, because you have better stories than I do. If you could group in groups of 4, somehow just turn around and talk to each other, and give some examples of either some of these or some that are on this handout here, of biases that you see in the workplace. Do you have any stories you can share? And then we'll do this for 10 minutes. And then I want to hear back from some of your stories. All right, I want to ask you guys if you have any stories that you can share. We've got some microphones to run around. I'm always interested to hear your stories because I'm sure they're better than mine. There's a mic coming right behind you.
Hi, I guess I used to start the same way I did here and say, I'm not an agilist. I'm actually a waterfall guy. And actually that's part of what I want to talk about, because I work with big projects, they're global telecommunication type projects. And because they're so large, it's difficult to break it down to smaller pieces that can be built in an agile way. Yet I work with other teams that do adopt the agile methodology. And the problem I have is getting agreement on schedules that I can use so I can move that project forward. And very often the reaction is, well, we don't work that way, this is agile. And everybody says it. They seem to get away with not worrying about schedule as a result.
So how would that be related to a bias?
Well, I think it's a bandwagon effect. I think it's
and jumping on the agile bandwagon?
They jump on it.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of explanation. They just say, you know, we're agile. This is the way we do
Yeah.
it. And I've got to adopt my workload and my progress and my timeline to meet whatever their schedule might be, which is often very nebulous.
Okay. That is an example of bandwagon. Anybody else?
Yeah, we have 2 here. I'll give mine, and if the other person wants to give theirs, they can feel free.
Mine is the IKEA effect, also known as gold plating. So I developed a lovely analytical model And I built it myself, so I was proud of it. And actually, my managers liked it. They certainly paid for it and gave me good performance evaluations. The sponsor was good with it, and even the users looked at it. But they never actually used it. And 30 years later, when I look at my career and look at that first thing, I realized that had a lot more thought and development and everything into it than those transit properties at all could use. They needed yay or nay, not a little subtlety. So it's sort of an IKEA effect, a little gold plating, and in retrospect, I'm surprised they took it and liked it. So that's the effect.
It's a tough thing for us engineers because we're intrinsically motivated to continue engineering. I mean, we fall trapped to this. I mean, I can easily have papers spread all over the floor, everything. My husband comes home from work, he's like, ah, what have you done? So yeah, we fall trapped to that. Anybody else have a story? Right here.
So I think this is an example of affinity bias. When I was hiring people, I tried to understand how they thought and how they solved problems. And I had a natural inclination to get people who thought about problems and solved them in the same ways I did, because I could understand what they were doing.
Sure.
And people who approached it differently, I didn't know what to make of them. So usually I didn't hire them.
On affinity bias, I had an African colleague tell me that about half of the white people in the company were subtly against Africans, not overtly, but just subtly, and that the other half of the people in the company were do-gooders who wanted to praise anything an African did, regardless of whether it was any good or not.
Yeah, we might do well.
And that they couldn't put me into either category.
Oh.
I think in the organization that I'm in right now, I've seen a little bit of, all of these biases throughout the organization in different teams. But I think more so in my team that I just recently joined, I've been there for about 2 months, is the sunken cost fallacy. So I inherited a product at this point that the engineering team has spent about 2 years putting all their labor and the company has continued to invest in. And I'm looking at it and stepping in now at this point and I'm saying, okay, but what is the value? And the only reason I'm questioning that is because when I go and I look at, we have a product out in the market and we have probably about maybe 15% of our clients, our customers, using this product. And so I'm questioning,
Sure.
where was the value? Why are we continuing to invest in this? And why are they continuing to come out with all these features? And they're going, and they're excited, and they have the argument as to when the decision was made, why they're doing it, and how it's come. But it's kind of hard to step in and go back now and try and put a halt to something. So it is a challenge.
For sure, yeah. Are you the product owner?
Yes, I am.
It's a big, got to find something better for them because they're going to continue building.
Especially when we're looking and it's only 15% of our customers are using it.
Yeah.
Anyone else concerned about that?
We have an auspicious effect in our company where the upper management ignores the people that are actually doing the work, and what they're doing is they're just motivated basically by moving ahead, profit, bringing in new sales, but a lot of the basics are being ignored in terms of how to bring in materials into the company, workflow, how to process the materials, eliminate rework, and it's just been a tough thing. It's something that you have to start off when you build a house. You have to start off building the foundation first before you start constructing the walls. So unfortunately, that's the way it is now, but I hope it changes.
Maybe you could get one of those big posters of an ostrich with their head hidden in sand and put it next to that, whatever.
They'd probably fire me. Showing them up.
We talk about confirmation bias. I've seen at work as a friend, a mentor of mine, we'll be discussing different situations, and he's higher up in the hierarchy and male, and he would often tell me, well, say this, or have you said that? And I would say, yes, I have. But it has a completely different effect when he says it. Confirming people's biases that he is in the management, therefore he knows better and what he says is right. They take what he said more seriously.
I have one from the 90s, so bear with me. I was working with the Army Corps of Engineers, so this is like a war story. I was programming a battlefield PC that was going to be used, connected to a radio that was going to control a system out there. And when I was working with the ROTC-educated officers, they told me that this should be easy as pie to do because these kids today, they've learned so much. They can just go up to a computer and do anything. They teach us what to do. You know, you've heard all those stories. Well, they were saying it back in the 90s. It might have been a little bit different then because the Army Corps of Engineers, they got their soldiers from the inner cities and the farms. And there weren't computers in those places at that time. But the officers insisted there would be no problem. But we went and tested the system, and we had the human factors people behind the Corps of Engineer soldiers who had the system there. After about 5 minutes, you saw this going on. Where the actual, so-called professional human factors people weren't taking data, but they were trying to help their subjects out. And they wrote a report and claimed it a great success. So I think it's all 5 biases there.
Go into talking about in further detail the affinity bias. My assertion is that an inclusive workforce is absolutely needed to be able to hire top talent. And absolutely needed to drive innovation, absolutely needed to foster creativity, and really to guide business strategies. So diversity is not a problem to solve, but it's your edge for business strategy. So multiple diverse perspectives lead to new ideas, new services, new products, and it really encourages out of the box thinking. So those are 2 assertions that you don't have to agree with, but just show of hands. How many people agree with that? Kind of. So there's a study that I don't have on the slides. It comes from McKinsey in 2015. They analyzed 366 public companies, and those in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity were 35% more likely to have financial returns above national industry medians. So there's really some hard data behind these assertions. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. A Canadian-based oil field service and supply company hired this new kid for their team. He came from Missouri and married a Canadian and is working there. And he noticed his webpage. And the design is set. And he says, are we ever going to be using our services in the Middle East where there's lots of oil? And he said, yeah, next month. Well, this kid happened to have a mother from Saudi Arabia, and he speaks Arabic. And this is a language that's written from right to left. And the entire web page was designed left to right. So the complete design had to be redone, and just lucky they hired this kid. Just lucky. So another example, somehow I ended up in a boardroom full of men who were struggling with a marketing campaign for a feminine hygiene product to be marketed in Asia. And I said, look, I'm not even going there. I'm not Asian. So they weren't so lucky. Where this comes into play, this is from Stack Overflow's research. It's a great piece of research about how we hire, who we hire, everything about hiring. 28%, the highest category of job discovery, comes from referrals. So are we referring based on our affinity groups? Probably, right? Probably. And our pipeline for hiring looks something like this. So we post on a job board, and then we capture these referrals, and then we find as many as possible, then we weed out the week several times, and we assess, we do more formal interviews, we weed out the week again and again, and then we finally close on compensation. So this actually is a completely different talk that I'm not doing, but this hiring strategy is it's for when you have a talent surplus. Do we have a talent surplus today? No, but we still use the same hiring strategy. Now, I'm going to be passing out the exercise. It's taped shut. I want you to do this individually, initially, and don't open the tape until I say open the tape. So this is our affinity bias exercise. So a little bit about this hiring. Job boards were invented in the time of the Great Depression, but we still use job boards. And this hiring strategy to funnel and bring in is based on the surplus, and we don't have this surplus. So how would this be inverted? If you think about that, how would you change that if you don't have this talent surplus? Okay, the affinity bias exercise, you have a column of 10, and it says your trusted group. I just want you to do this individually and initial some names, not including family members. Just make some maybe first name or write their initials of 10 people that you trust. And if you're like me, maybe you only have 5 people that you trust. Just do some initials there. If somebody's foreign-born, age, sexual orientation, mental or physical disability, education, marital status, religious denomination, and then another category, just leave the other blank. Go ahead and codify the answers in there however you like for the 5 to 10 people that are in your trusted group. And I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. So after you've codified this, see if you can see any patterns per the columns or overall. And does anybody have any patterns that they see that they don't mind sharing? Mostly male. Any other patterns that you see?
Mine are very mixed except for race and all Caucasian.
All Caucasian?
I found that they tend to be a lot like ourselves somewhere or another.
Yeah, so this exercise just brings this unconscious bias to conscious. And with any unconscious bias, the first step you want to do is try to just make it conscious. So the lady next to you was talking about confirmation bias. Is there a way that you can have a communication to make this unconscious thing conscious? And a lot of times you'll find out that the other person has absolutely no idea that they're mansplaining to you all the time, you know? So just try to make it conscious. Like I mentioned, I did this at a party, and I found out, I like rock and roll music and really super smart women. And, so if you ever want to meet an engineer female, I know a lot of them because they're in my affinity group. So what you want to do is once you make this conscious, then ask your questions, how closely does the demographics in your affinity represent the customer base and the organization, and how does that affect things? So if you had this circle here where you have your trusted 10 in here, and then friends, I would say friends, you know, they come to your parties and stuff, but they're not part of your trusted 10. You invite them to your parties. And then acquaintances. And then where would you put the customer and all that? As you go out, you can see you get more diverse, right? So maybe your customer is you know, somebody way out here. And how does this affect your ability to empathize with the customer if your affinity group is not any at all closely related to the customer? Does anybody want to share any of their observations?
A lot of them were the same as mine, except, let's say, among gender, out of the 10, 4 were women. Within disability, there were 2 of them had some disability, so that was varied. And marital status varied. And the other, so those varied, and then racial, foreign-born, sex orientation, and others were quite the same.
Mm-hmm.
But what got me is, well, quite, it's gender diverse. That sort of hit home. 4 out of 10, not my gender, and 8 out of 10, not my marital status.
Yeah, yeah. I personally have this quest. I think this category here, this disability category, is the most underserved category in terms of hiring. Mental disability or physical disability. I mean, you could just have an edge if you decided to look here in your company.
I don't know, but, you know, I have friends of various races and various national born, but, you know, they tend to be generally, of the top 10, they tend to be generally white, more male than female, but there is some female. Ages from about 20 to 65. I don't know the marital status of a lot of them, but there were 1 gay and 3 straight are the ones that I do know. 2 had some type of disability out of the 10. And some of them I don't know the education, but it's from anywhere from high school to being in college, community college, up to a doctor's degree. And they were more married than single, but there were some of both, and they mainly were Protestant, but a lot of them I don't know what they are, what their religion are.
So you
I
could
do have Jewish friends and Hindu friends, but they weren't in the top 10.
So you didn't really see a pattern.
No, I did see a pattern with all of them. I only had white people, and people, as far as I know, born in the United States in the top 10.
Right, okay.
So those 2 seem to be a pattern. I guess the others didn't seem to be a pattern, did it?
Yeah.
In 3 words, I could say, I trust myself.
Yeah, that's how it works. Okay, I want you guys to think about this and talk to each other, and then I want to just do an open QA at the end. Looking at diversity and inclusion as a business strategy, not a problem to be solved, how would embracing diversity and inclusion, embracing these diverse perspectives, have an impact on those bullets? Customer empathy, worldview of markets, potential customers, opportunities, possibilities. How would that change if you had a really diverse team? So why don't you talk about that for a little bit, and let's just say 10 minutes, and then I want to hear your feedback. What's one thing that you could take action on on this point. I want to know from some of you what your answer was to this question. Embracing diverse perspectives, how does it have an impact on customer empathy, worldview of markets, potential customers, opportunities, possibilities? And what's one thing that you could take action on? So if anybody, meaning like maybe Monday, you know? So anybody have anything they want to share? Because this is where I learn, so I would love to pass the mic right here.
If you have a diverse group that's representing a company or a certain function within the company, say a sales team, customer empathy with somebody that's going to be a potential customer for the company, and if you have somebody of that ethnicity that's going to be able to relate to individuals and management inside that other company, it's going to help you in sales and hopefully close the sale. Worldview of markets, we could see where that would be applicable too, because if you had somebody from a different country that you were trying to sell your product and market your product in that country, they would have an understanding of how that marketplace works. Potential customers felt that that kind of tied in with what that person would bring in terms of knowing where the marketplace might be within a certain country, say for a certain type of product line. If you're selling hiking boots and you're trying to sell them in mountainous terrain in Germany, the buyers that you would want to sell to, they could help you out with that. And somebody that would have appreciation for your product that you're trying to sell. Opportunities, again, they would hopefully help you identify where the opportunity is based on who the major buyers are within that market. So you spend your marketing dollars targeting those types of companies. Possibilities, that's probably something that would be at the beginning part of the marketing campaign before you put dollars into developing a marketing program, put dollars into motivating your sales force to get ready for a certain targeted market. That could be something that would end up probably at the beginning of the decision-making process. So that's kind of the way we felt about it.
I think that diversity is very good if it doesn't cost you too much in competence of people. And the concern that I have is if you go too far in emphasizing things to get diversity, you might be sacrificing, ability or competence. And it's, in our group we were discussing that it's a trade-off that you sometimes need to make, or need to decide, what you're willing to give up, if anything, in order to achieve diversity.
Has anybody worked on a team that was really diverse? And how did it feel?
I would argue with the comment made by you as well as someone in our group, and just say that as there are affirmative action plans and programs at universities where potentially unqualified students are admitted, if you're just going to gauge against the typical metrics and the standards and the scores and grades and all of that, when you get unqualified students in there, you're creating a better opportunity for not only the university and the students themselves, but for the world, because you're now upgrading, if you will, that population, and I think the same can apply to the workforce.
So I have to add to that, because when I hear about diversity, I ask people, what does that mean? It's not just about race or gender. It could be, my sister and I were very diverse, and we are the same race, we come from the same parents, but we are extremely diverse in our views and our behavior and our norms. So, I worked in an organization that had a very diverse team, And that was from everything from our height difference to our lifestyle habits to our sexual orientation. And I have to say, with that team, it probably, when I look at my career overall, is probably the best time that I have had and the most successes that I have had. And I can look at that in terms of financial compensation and just overall, you know, health and well-being and how I would feel coming home from work, working long hours, and how the day would go by so quickly. And it was wonderful. And, you know, now I'm in an organization that I can see I'm working with similar people with similar backgrounds, you know, for myself, and it's a little bit different. And I have to say, it's not a bad experience, but it's not my nirvana.
What's one thing that you think you could take action on to get a little bit more inclusive and diverse in your group? Did you think about that? You don't have to answer if you didn't think about it.
I've actually thought about it, and I think it has to do with, you know, it starts from our hiring process, and I can see how, you know, they were attracted to me, and, you know, like I knew that they were going to hire me. You know, I mean, I really did, and I knew the other candidates that were left, and I could see that I was very closely mirroring the organizational team and their values, where some of the other candidates, I think they were just as qualified, but they were a little bit different. And so I think the disadvantage for them was the fact that they were different.
Well,
I don't think anyone in our group disagreed with the notion that more diverse groups are more fun and give you a lot of advantages work-wise. The question is how you get there. And something that I discovered as a hiring manager is if I went to the same old places and did the same old things to get applications, I would still get mostly the same old candidates. And to the extent that we found unusual candidates, it was times when we were able to find sources that we hadn't thought about.
sure.
Tech girls, if we're looking for women, as a group where we knew some people who could speak favorably for applying to us. And the other side of it is, so you get these people who aren't like you, and you're interviewing them, and they don't get your jokes, they don't look at things quite like you, and it's harder to evaluate them because you have to find criteria other than do they make me feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
When I caught looking at it, there was a primary result there saying, yeah, of course that will work well, to have more diversity. But what hit home is, well, it depends on the coherence of the team. If you have a diverse team, they've got to be able to work coherently together, which requires a lot of people skills, listening, actually being uncomfortable for a while. A lot of people skills to discuss, to get to really like and get along with, and even make friends with the diverse individuals. If it works, then you get all of these impacts. If it doesn't work, you get an organization which is flat out in pieces.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, my advice is to, when you're confronted with trying to make your organization more diverse, the first step is to go from unconscious bias to conscious bias. And this simple exercise that we did is something that you can replicate and do yourselves with your HR team. You'll be given the flat file. You can change the categories however you like to make so it makes more sense for whatever organization that you have. But yeah, if you can just get the awareness that everybody has this unconscious biases, and we just go from unconscious to conscious, and then you can have a conversation, and then maybe you can do something about it. Okay, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, and I had a good time. You guys are a great group. And I think it's just it's over.